G'day guys, it's Cece and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be focusing on complexity in characters, so let's jump straight into it. So since we're focusing on complexity in characters in this video today, I chose two characters I thought were too over complex for their original design. So this first character I chose, I'm not sure its name, but it does have the word fairy grape at the top. Now that could be an adopt description or something that was given to them beforehand, or it could be the character's name, but I'm not quite sure. I mainly chose this one because it has a lot of things going on. Not only the colours, but the details and accessories as well. One of the things that I found quite off-putting was the accent of all the grapes. I'm not quite sure why they were put there, or where that was described or requested for this character, but I really do think it's such an off-putting thing for the rest of the colour palette and the design of this character. So I started off by envisioning what I planned for this character, what I saw the personality of it being and the things that it could grow into. So the pose that I chose to go with was quite a feminine design. Now I knew I wanted to mainly focus towards the fox side of this character. I saw that it has antlers and hooves on it, so it's probably a fox-deer hybrid or something along those lines. However, I wanted to focus more on this fox side, as I see it's more elegant, and this color palette really does reflect that more female and elegant side, so I wanted to reflect that in the rest of the drawing and the pose. Now, if anyone knows me, I love to draw wings, so I was quite excited with this design. It's not something that drew me to the design in particular, however, it just is something that I find joy out of drawing. I honestly don't do it enough, so excuse me if my wing anatomy is a bit off. I try my best with researching these things, however, this is the style that I chose to go with my wing design. Now, as I sketch this new drawing, I keep looking back at the original artwork for reference, deciding what I think is making the character too complex and what I wanted to keep. Something that I mentioned earlier was the grapes. I got rid of all of the grapes. I'm sorry to the original owner of this character if they really did like the grapes, but I find it is such a weird and different add-on to this character. I get so many different vibes from it, and it's such an odd thing to me to be placed on here. Now obviously you can make characters based on grapes or have grapes, but I don't think this character really needed it. I don't think it connected with the grapes or really had any need for it. It was just such a out of place accessory to me. The only other thing that I actually added / kept to this character that kind of hinted at those grapes are the jewels hanging down from the character's antlers. Now these just resemble grapes and they kind of allude to the fact that they were there. I also originally drew on a grapevine crown. I later took that off as I thought that it was a bit distracting to me. However, I still think the small essence of the grapes are there for those who are wondering. Now the other thing I want to quickly touch on is what I did with the hair. Now in the original design, I noticed that the hair is less of hair and more like a fur, so they've kept the fur in there to make it resemble the look of hair, so I kind of tried to do the same thing. I didn't want it to be too long, but I didn't want it to be noticeably just like someone stuck a wig on a fox. As for another few details, I made the antlers smaller as I thought it was a very weird contradicting thing to the size of the wings, so I made them a bit smaller, and I made the back or hind legs back into the canine fox feet instead of the original hooves. But as for the rest of the information, there's not really else much to say here, so I'll let you guys just sit back and relax and enjoy the rest of my sketching process, and I'll catch up with you guys later. Now onto the line work. So I just did your basic thing and I lightened the opacity of my original sketch and I brought it into Ibis Paint on my phone. Now this is just a personal preference of mine. I find lining artwork on my phone a lot easier. I find drawing on my phone a lot more natural. So that's why I just brought it into here and I did the line art with different size brushes to give that definition, and then we're done and we're going to move on to coloring. Now when designing the patterns for this character, I actually didn't run into many issues. Now I'm not very used to using pastel colours, however I do find it quite enjoyable to do. I actually kept the majority of the original colours on this character. Now there are a few things like the purple on the legs that I found a bit more to the grey side, how I described in a previous video with your greys, having a warmer or a cooler tone really does help and give pop to the character. I noticed even without eyedropping this purple that it was very ashy and very grey, so that's about the only thing that I changed colour wise. So to start off, I lightly blushed the facial area with this kind of peachy colour and mixed it in with the pink and the lighter yellow areas. I found this just made her feel a lot more cute and dainty and really gave the effect that I was wanting with this character. I also added onto her muzzle area the normal markings of a fox. Now in the original face I found it extremely cluttered and purple, and I found that really didn't match with the rest of the body. You have all these gorgeous whites and sunsetty colours, and then the face is just purple. So I kept it mainly white, again adding those blushy colours, really giving her that dainty feminine look that I was looking for in this character. Now another thing I mentioned in the previous video focusing on colours was matching your cool tones with your warm tones. Now what this character does actually really well is having the eyes be a cooler tone. Now the rest of the character is quite warm with their sunsetty colours, as I mentioned beforehand, so this aqua is a really good thing to balance out the rest of the character and make it feel a lot more united as a character whole together. Now back to the grapes, you can see here that I'm colouring in those jewels on those horns, alluding back to the fact of the original grapes. Now this is a great little subtle way to keep those in there while not overpowering the character with such a big and odd accessory. So it's a great little thing to make her feel quite, you know, naive and dainty and fragile, while also giving the character something to go off that gives them personality. Now a big thing that a lot of people always get mixed up with when creating a character, especially in the complexity section, is mixing your patterns. Now this character not in particular has a lot of patterns, instead it has a lot of gradients mixed with those dots and those grapes. So these things really do clash together and you want to avoid these things. Now it's fantastic to have an accessory that gives your character more personality to bounce off of and have them grow in one way or another. However, adding more of these things really does make it clash, and it makes the character overall such an eye bleed to look at, and you don't know where to focus on the character. So you want a focus point. The focus point that I chose to emphasize on this character are the wings. I thought it was a fantastic way to give the character such a cool and unique way of expressing their personality, so I made them a lot larger and accentuated them a lot more by also sizing down those antlers, as I mentioned beforehand. Now back to the patterns, something that I mentioned beforehand was the gradients. Now I kept the gradients, however I made them blend in a lot more. I find in the original they're very cut and dry and not much bleed and gradient actually goes into them. I also kept the dots, but as you may have noticed, I've given more of a freckly texture and pattern. This is really just to make it a lot more softer and still keep them in there. Those big dots really do make them such a distracting point when the white is such a pure part of the character that really balances out the rest of the colour palette. I quickly brought that aqua back in using that marking under the eye, and we're done. I think this character turned out really well, and I think it's a big improvement from the original, especially in the complexity area. But I hope you guys like this one, but right now we're going to move on to the next design. Now I chose this character because I found it was a great way to show you guys the difference between the clash of patterns and gradients. However, we'll get back to that later as we are currently in the sketch process. Now something I always like to start with when designing a character or redesigning a character is their personality. Now this image doesn't really give me much to work with. I know it's on a base, so a lot of things could be said from that, like it could be a fat and sleepy hyena, but however I found this was a base, so you don't really know what the artist is actually going for in this image. I instead took inspiration off the colours and ended up going with a quite bright and bubbly personality, a hyena that's quite happy and loud and loves life. So that's where I drew my inspiration for this sketch process and the character I wanted to portray in this redesign. Now, the first thing I noticed when referencing this image in the sketch process was that it had no defining features. One of the things that you learn in character design is the silhouette process. So what that means is grabbing a character and blacking them out, just making them a pure silhouette. Would you be able to tell that that's that character? Now, in this situation, I think not. So that's something I tried to focus on with this character. One of the features I noticed that I could accentuate was the hair, and that's what I ended up going with. I went with quite a large and bright bushy mohawk right down the back of the hyena's body, kind of acting as a mane. But I think this really does bring not only an accessory and a personality point that works well in a silhouette, but a fantastic add-on to the character that gives them such a great standout feature. Now, I also drew this character quite stylized. As you may notice, the teeth are not at all what a hyena's teeth would look like. Now, I normally do this with hyena characters or personal hyena characters, as I find it really does give off that big hyena grin that you would expect from such a laughing animal. Now, as for the rest of the character's personality, I mainly wanted to use the colours and the patterns to push that through out into the viewer. So for the rest of this, I'll let you guys just continue watching the sketch and I'll catch you guys later. Now that that sketch is done, we're going to move on to the liner. Now, I quickly fixed up a few proportional issues that I found after asking a couple of my family members, and then I started to continue lining the drawing. Now, as I said beforehand, I just lined the original sketch, bring it into Ibis Paint on my phone, and lined the character in 3 different sizes of penwork. And now that we've finished the liner, we can move on to colouring. Now, when it came to colouring this character, it wasn't as easy as the previous one. It was a lot of trial and error. There are a lot of different colours here that quite clash but also work together, so I had to make sure that they were working well and I knew where to put them. I started off by adding colour in the areas that I thought were well placed on the original design. You also may have noticed that I have changed the symbol in the eye to a star. Now this is just to reflect the interstellar theme that was going on with this character, and I thought it brought another great point of personality that can be reflected through that particular attribute. Now the first few things I noticed when looking at this character and deciding what I wanted to redesign was actually the lack of gradients. Now I personally have a hyena character, so I've done quite a bit of research into their patternings and what a human eye recognizes as a hyena, and a big portion of that is actually gradients, believe it or not. A big part of noticing a hyena is the particular muzzle markings, ear shapes and tail shape, as well as the long neck that hyenas have, of course. However, this was something that I did actually find quite lacking in the original drawing. Instead of having that gradient on the muzzle, you find that it is just a clean cut shape down from the top of the muzzle area down around the mouth. Now here you can see I've been focusing on the main area. Now what I did is I took away that constellation. I found that be another one of those patterns that really doesn't work. Now it can work in certain areas, I just personally think that this character didn't need it. So I focused on different gradients. I intensified that blue and yellow area of the mane, using that as a good highlight feature and a great little thing to draw you into the character and make you know it's them. Now here you can see I'm going in with the muzzle gradients. Now I didn't want to just stick with that dark blue, I also wanted to bring in that lighter blue that was in the original design. This just helps with the gradient as well and brings another pop of colour to the face instead of leaving it all dark. Now since the head is such a key attribute with this character, I made sure that all the colours really did pop. As in more so the accent colours as the teeth, the eye, the streaks in the hair and the inner ear. Now with the paw areas that you've just seen me do, I really thought that the orange and the yellow was such a quite tacky colour to use for that area, especially since hyenas are known for having darker areas around the feet. I continued to go in on the back area and start adding in these purples and pinks. Now I used a lot more of this darker purple than the pink, as the original had quite a bit of pink. However, I wanted to move more towards using that yellow as the defining feature and that accent colour, and move more away to the pink being a small accent colour or a colour that helps blend in the rest. Something I also took out were the orange spots. Now I assumed that the original orange spots were to help define the hyena as a spotted hyena as opposed to other species like the striped hyena. Even though that those were there as a defining feature, I decided to take them away as another colour that clashes. Using the orange, I found we already had enough of those, being the yellow and the smaller areas of pink. Now to make up for the missing constellation, I tried to add the constellation on the facial area. I tried this and I really didn't think it worked. Again, it was another distracting feature and something that I found clashed. So instead I used them more like a freckle marking as I did on the previous character. This is just a great way to add in spots and a point of highlight, but also give a cute little feature that also references back to the original stars. So with this character, mainly I just redesigned a lot of the areas that were solid color and moved them more to the gradient area. Now solids can be used really well, however in a character such as a hyena, and this one in particular, I found such a topic needed to be portrayed with gradients. And they're done. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I think they turned out super cute and a great improvement from the original. Well, there you have it, another successful character redesign video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I hope this was helpful to you guys in some way, but right now I want to take this opportunity as always to thank my Patreons. Make It With Alex, Aqualotl and Travi75. Patreon is a great way to gain behind the scenes access to footage, work in progresses, upcoming videos, and also put your word in on what you want to see next. It's also another great way to help support me and continue doing great things for you guys. If that's something you might be interested in, there's a link in the description, but for right now I hope this video was helpful and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!